semuanya pasti akan bisa diserap, cuma tinggal waktunya kapan. Jadi kalau di Indonesia sendiri sebenarnya lembaga-lembaganya sudah cukup aware tentang itu, tapi juga perkembangan kejahatan cybernya kan juga pesat ya. Jadi akhirnya memang harus terus update.
Well, there isn't a single action that will prevent future threats. I believe that encouraging global cyber collaboration is an effective way to share and learn from one another about to best implement future defense strategies. In conjunction, promoting industry-based awareness campaigns and a wide array of educational programs that deliver current skills and knowledge is key to training the future employees in this fast-paced industry.
semuanya pasti akan bisa diserap, cuma tinggal waktunya kapan.
Selamat pagi, selamat bergabung bersama kami dalam acara Fintech Skills for the Future. Nama saya Clarice Campbell dan saya akan memandu acara di pagi hari ini. Senang sekali ada sejumlah pakar fintech Indonesia dan Australia yang bergabung di acara ini. Good morning, thanks for joining us in Fintech Skills for the Future. My name is Clarice Campbell, Lead Advisor for Skills at Catalyst, and I will be your host today. This dialogue will be presented in both English and Indonesian. So at the bottom of the screen, you should be able to see an interpretation button. If you require this service, please click on the button and select your preferred language. And as this is a webinar, viewers won't be able to turn on their camera or microphone. So if you have a question for a panelist, there is a Q&A box which you can type your question into. Please identify yourself when asking a question by writing down your name and affiliation and make it clear who the question is directed to. Please note this event is also being live streamed on YouTube through our channel at IA-CEPA ECP Catalyst. So if you would like to watch from there, you're more than welcome to. We have a great lineup of speakers today representing the fintech space in Indonesia and Australia. Bapak Triyono Gani is the Executive Director of the Digital Finance Innovation Group at the Indonesian Financial Services Authority, or OJK. Bapak Karyania Damasaputra is the President Director of OVO, co-founder and CEO of Bereska, and Vice Chairman of the Indonesian Fintech Association, or AFTEC. We also have Ibu Devi Ariani, who is the Executive Director of the Indonesian Services Dialogue Council. Lauren Adams, who is the Deputy Consul General at the Australian Consulate in Surabaya and the Trade and Investment Commissioner for Austrade Indonesia. We have Stuart Stoyan, who is a Melbourne-based fintech founder and investor. Bapak Eric Sugandi, a Tokyo-based consultant with the Asian Development Bank Institute. Bapak Johannes Silalahi, Human Resources Manager at Bibit and Stockbit. And finally, Dr. Fari Benli, PhD, IT Lecturer at Melbourne Polytechnic. So without further ado, let's get into the session. You can't talk about fintech in Indonesia without hearing from the man who has been part of the industry since day one. He is an experienced techpreneur with a demonstrated history of working in the financial technology, e-investment, digital media industry, and regulatory framework, with a Master's of Public Policy from the George Washington University in Washington, D.C. So let's welcome Bapak Karyania Damasaputra, President Director of OVO, co-founder and CEO of Berexa, and Vice Chairman of the Indonesian Fintech Association. Pak Kar, good to have you with us.
Thank you, Clarice. Hi, everybody. Good morning. So I'll be speaking not in Indonesia, not in English, but in English, so Indonesian English. So pertama-tama terima kasih for inviting me. And then Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Selamat pagi, salam sejahtera untuk kita semua. Di sini ada yang kami hormati guru saya, Pak Triyono Gani, Direktur Eksekutif GIKD dari OJK. I think we are really fortunate to have Pak Tri in this forum. I think Pak Tri is one of the most progressive regulators in the fintech space. And I think we are really grateful for all the guidance that Pak Tri and also OJK is providing to all of us. And then we can see the growth of the fintech today in Indonesia. And also all the panelists. and all the audience. I have just 2 pages of presentation. Okay. Yeah, so basically what I'm trying to say here is just not too complicated things. First, I want to elaborate about the growth of the fintech in Indonesia. And on the second part, I think we also saw the videos, right? And I think I'm fully aligned with the videos just played before we began the session. So the second part of my presentation is I want to emphasize the importance of the how we, amid the fast and the acceleration of the fintech growth in Indonesia, I think we need to start seriously tackle the cybersecurities and the consumer protection issues. So maybe the first page, maybe, yeah. Ya, so kita lihat ya bahwa ada setidaknya ada 4 tren di Indonesian fintech space, maybe for the last 3 or 4 years gitu ya. And then this trend is being accelerated selama pandemic. Jadi yang pertama kita lihat bahwa e-money trend yang bertumbuh dengan sangat cepat ya. Kita melihat bahwa ini based on the data from Bank of Indonesia. So the total value of transactions last year itu sudah mencapai more than 300 trillion IDR. And then if we are talking about the growth, so the CAGR of the e-money growth selama 5 years gitu ya, itu around 112%, right? And then please also note that out of this significant growth of the e-money in Indonesia, almost 80%, right, of this growth is being constantly contributed by the native fintech companies like OVO, GoPay, Link Aja, Dana, etc. So only 20% of this growth contributed by the e-money generated by banks, right? So I think hopefully we can see the significant growth of the e-money and fintech industry in Indonesia. And secondly, MSME also becoming a very important topic lah for the economic digital development in Indonesia. Yang saya ingin share di sini, again, I think we've been also seeing numerous proof, right? Numerous quantitative proof, proving that the presence and the growth of the fintech industry in Indonesia also start contributing positively to the MSME growth in Indonesia. So ini kan secara bercanda gitu ya, OVO dan juga GoPay, Link Aja, and also Tokopedia, Bukalapak sering dibilang bahwa ini jagoan-jagoan cashback gitu ya. So turn out, so this cashback strategy is not only benefiting the fintech or the technology company themselves, but also according to the quantitative data, we have now proof that this cashback strategy and this marketing strategy generated by the fintech and the technology companies also benefiting the growth of the MSME. So for instance, for example, so in OVO now we have around 2 million merchants across the country, and then more than 90% of our merchants basically consist of the MSMEs, and most of them are also not even medium enterprises, but also very small and also micro, like warung lah ya, warung, warteg, kios, right, etc. And then based on our experience, for those merchants participating in our marketing and cashback, and also we are also of course pushing the marketing and also the education, and we are also sending the traffic to these merchants. So for these merchants participating in our campaign, So in average, we saw there were a constant increase in their sales in average around 24 to 30%. So I think hopefully this is a really good trends that we are going to see more and more in the future, right? And then the third trend that I want to share in this forum regarding the retail investment. So now we are also seeing now we are I think one of the speakers in the panel will be also coming from a friend from Debit and Stockbit, right? One of the largest investing company in the country. So I think we all in this area also seeing again another significant growth, especially starting during the pandemic. So now in total, we have more than 8 million investor accounts, right, in our capital market. So if we compare these numbers compared to the, let's say, in 2016 when OJK started allowing the distribution of mutual funds via the digital platform, right? So I'm talking about a period or a time window only in the 5 years. So at that time, right, back 5 years ago, the total number of our mutual fund investors was only 270,000. So from 270,000 back in 5 years ago, now we have more than 8 million. And then if we see the data, right, the composition of our investors' accounts in Indonesia right now, out of this 8 million, around 75 to 80% generated by the technology companies like Bareksa, Bibit, Ajaib, and etc. Right? And then lastly, I think this is very important to note, right? So in my view and in my experience, Indonesia has experienced 4 waves of digitalization. Maybe 20 years ago, the first wave came to our media space. And then maybe 5 to 6 years later, maybe around 2009 or 2010, we start seeing that the second wave came into our e-commerce and the online travel, right? And then starting 5 years ago, we were introduced to a term of fintech, right? And then the digitalization wave came into our financial industry. And then now, I think started in the pandemic. I think this is really important to note. I believe now we are in the middle of what I call as the 4th wave of Indonesian digitalization. So this 4th wave now is coming into the public space or the public surface, public surface space, as we call it, as G2P or government to people area. So I think OVO and also several other big tech companies work together with the government, with the Prakerja management office, to start building an integrated platform to start distributing not only distributing, right, but also to receive the registration fully online, and then define who is eligible, who is not, and then distribute the money, Prakerja money, fully online. And then throughout this program is really successful, and I think this is the milestone of as I mentioned earlier, this is the 4th wave of the digitalization in the G2P space. So as you can see in the deck, so the figure is really significant. So for the last 2 years, so we have distributed almost 8 trillion IDR to around almost 12 million Indonesian youngsters. And this program will be continuing this year. And this year, I think government will distribute prakerja money for, I think, another 4 to 5 trillions. Okay, next slide. And this is my last slide. Okay, so tadi saya udah jelasin bahwa the growth of the fintech company is really accelerating, has been accelerating, and I think kita akan melihat this acceleration will be more and more and will be faster and faster. But however, I think again, fully aligned with the videos that we just saw before we began the session. I think now this is the time that we need to put our attention on the cybersecurity, right? And also the data protection. So in my experience in OVO, in Bareksa, and also how we are helping this G2B initiative, right? So the growth, the super fast of fintech growth and fintech penetration in Indonesia also come along and come together with the growing risk of the cybersecurity threats and consumer protection risk. So this is my point here. This is maybe my suggestion that I think we need to discuss this in this forum. So the consequence of this in here, the growth is in here, the growth of the risk threat is really significant. And I think really important that we need to not only to put serious attention to this, but also how we as a country we should be prepared, right, for this significant growth of risk. So that's why I believe, right, in my view, so if we are talking about the skills, right, for the future of the fintech industry in Indonesia, in which the fintech contribution and the impact is getting more and more significant and getting deep and deeper, right, in our financial industry and in our financial world, I think now the discussion on, of course, the talent gap, right, is only a constant discussion, right, in the talent or technology talents in Indonesia. But in my view, now this is the time, right, when we discuss about the talent gaps in the technology area, I think the discussion shouldn't be put not only on the engineering side, right, on the product side, on the digital marketing side, but I think more and more importantly, I think we need also to discuss how, as a country, we need to be prepared. We need to prepare our talents, right, to tackle and to anticipate the growing threat of the cybersecurity and the data protection. So I think this is really concerning. And then now every day we are seeing that the forms of the cybersecurity threats is very sophisticated, very advanced, right? And then it threatens in every aspects of our fintech end to end, right? Starting from the when we onboard the users, right? So we are talking about the risk, the cybersecurity risk that trying to compromise our eKYC mechanics until the transaction, right? So again, I think that is my notes, Clarice, that I want to share based on my experience. So I think that's all I have to I can share in this forum. And again, thank you so much for inviting me, and thank you so much for I think discussing these really important topics for the future of Indonesia fintech and Indonesia financial world moving ahead. Thank you.
Terima kasih Bapak Karunia Dharma Saputra for your great opening address. I think you identified a couple of key themes that we'll continue to discuss during this forum. Now, it wouldn't be a webinar without a mandatory group photo. So I'm actually going to ask all of the speakers to turn on their camera and we'll take a couple of photos. So Can we bring that up? Yep, just waiting on a couple more. You can turn on your video. Let me highlight Ibu Devi. Yep. And Johanna. Oh, yeah. Do it if you're there. Could you turn on your camera? Okay, we've got Lauren. All right, excellent. That's everyone, right? Okay, so everybody smile. 1, 2, 3. And again, maybe we can do Gaya Bebas this time. So make a pose, do something. All right, 1, 2, 3. Great, thank you so much, everyone. So joining us now is Bapak Triyono Gani. He is the Executive Director of the Digital Finance Innovation Group at the Indonesian Financial Services Authority, or OJK. The OJK, as you may know, performs regulatory and supervisory duties over financial service activities in banking, capital markets, and non-bank financial industry sectors in Indonesia. Selamat pagi, Pak Tri.
Selamat pagi, good morning, Clarice. Good morning, everyone. Nice to see you all. Okay, do I have to start now or? Okay, all right, thank you very much. Okay, selamat pagi, Bapak Ibu sekalian. Mohon maaf. Very good morning. I would like to greet my best friend, my mentor, my best counterpart as well, Pak Karania. How are you, Bapak? Mudah-mudahan sehat semua nih. And also Clarice and the team.
Terima kasih, Pak. Ini buat saya bukan mentor. I'm ini student of my guru.
Actually, I learned everything, so many things from you, Pak. Okay, and also the panelists and the attendees of this webinar. Thank you very much for having me in this very prestigious webinar. And I also enjoy hearing Pak Kar presentation on the risk of utilizing the digital services. This is very important issues, and I just also left from my parallel session on the QIC because OJK now is conducting a very important webinar as well. This is also part of G20 presidency activities. And we are talking about how to increase our security in implementing the QIC process due to the increasing activities in the digital financial sector. Echoing what Pak Kar just mentioned about how fast the speed of digitalization in Indonesia, creating threat definitely. Pak Kar also very bluntly talking about the threat itself, and then what kind of threat that we are facing now. This is very serious issue, and regulators as OJK should come forward and then try to handle this issue very quickly. Otherwise, we are going to be left behind. And then the most dangerous part is that the public would then suffer from the loss. That's a very important issue that we always consider. we would like to give public very good services in terms of very cheap, very fast, and also very secure, as in security is again very, very important. So let me deliver my keynote speech, especially talking about the fintech skills for the future. Um, my colleague would like to navigate the presentation. So first of all, I would like to invite to express our gratitude to God Almighty, since only with His blessing and willing we could gather on this very prominent occasion, the event of FinTech Skill for the Future. I would like to thank the organizing committee for inviting me to this appealing event to discuss how investment in skills development, especially in the digital aspect, are essential. It could enhance financial inclusion and modernize the financial industry. Ladies and gentlemen, Indonesia and the world faces a pandemic situation that affects every aspect. The COVID-19 pandemic has reshaped our activities in many ways. Less mobility, work from home, virtual meetings, long distance learning, and online shopping are everyday business activities that make robust internet bandwidth and extensive internet network as an essential aspect. However, thankfully, with technology, we benefit of financial product and services can be enjoyed without being bound with time or places, which is very relevant to today's condition. This is an essential, especially in the COVID-19 pandemic, in which Indonesia and the rest of the world have been running into an economic slump and crisis. Innovation in digital finance has emerged primarily as profit-driven initiatives to explore business opportunities such as untapped markets or markets that became less attractive or too costly for established financial institutions, particularly in the post-crisis context, remittances and specific regions or countries. In turn, this competitive force has been driving incumbents to innovate as well. And my last statement was definitely supported by Pakar's data. Honorable ladies and gentlemen, I would like to consider that we are lucky to witness the transformation of our financial system from traditional brick and mortar branches, the high cost of point of sale system, and the lack of physical credit and or debit cards or digitized financial sector that is beyond the old style financial services. Speaking to the digitized financial industry, some areas need a total first principle rethink, one of which is digital talent. Technology is always about doing more with less. Yet, that combination is effectively only if we pair technology with the right human skills. Just as technological disruption has generally led to automation and the elimination of outdated jobs, it has also always created new jobs and opportunities. This is why innovation is commonly described as a creative destruction. But the creative aspect of innovation is entirely depend on people. We can simultaneously augment humans and technology if we can leverage human adaptability to reskill and upskill our workforces. Google Indonesia predicts that Indonesia's digital economy would grow by in 2025 will be worth around US dollar 146 billion. President Jokowi's fourth pillar connects this prediction for accelerating national digital transformation in the preparation of digital talent human resources with a target of 9 million skilled digital talents by 2030. This, however, does not go in hand with the situation happening in Indonesia. As reported by World Economic Forum, it showed that digital skills in Indonesia, 60% of them still fell behind compared to Singapore that has figure of 77 and Malaysia that has figure of 66%. Indonesia has a tech talent shortage due to disparities in access and quality, such as limited access of technology in Indonesia and more complex technical information and communication technology skills, the ICT skills. The shortage of digital talent was previously wallowed by Indonesians' lack of digital financial literacy. Based on 2019 National Survey of Financial Literacy and Inclusion conducted by OJK, the Financial Service Authority, digital financial literacy reached only 36%, while digital financial inclusion was only 31.26%. So we can compare with the whole digital financial literacy. This is specifically on digital financial literacy. Please distinguish between those two. This low figure is affected by unbalanced digital infrastructure, unawareness of digital financial products, and customers' big experience while utilizing digital financial innovation. I can also give you an example with this last point. Probably it's because of bad experience and bad design of the application that has very low user experience score, for example. And especially we are also talking about the lacking of infrastructure in Indonesian ICT system. So this is also the factor of negative that can be drag down the result of the usage of digital financial transaction in Indonesia. In Indonesia, the necessity for digital financial literacy is even more significant because of the low levels of education and the diversity of the population, particularly underserved group, including the poor and the near poor, those in rural and outlying areas, and women as well. The lack of customers' knowledge of how the digital finance product and service work could result in the customer's loss. These customers will be reluctant to get any more financial products and services, resulting in lost market confidence. The circumstances will be one of the barriers of digital financial integration, solving digital financial inclusion in Indonesia. So the contribution of digital financial innovation would be less if all the barriers could not be overcome. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, it is my honor to mention that OJK is responding proactively to embrace digital talent development to enhance the acceleration of digital financial inclusion. OJK considers talent to be a vital part of developing a sustainable digital finance ecosystem in the country. This is following the regulation of POJK number 13 on digital financial innovation, which aims to encourage synergy within the digital financial services ecosystem, a community of authorities, providers, consumers, and other parties that interact and support the development of responsible and inclusive fintech product and services. As emphasized in Indonesia Digital Financial Roadmap, OJK vision of a digital finance sector in Indonesia rests on four main factors. Fintech that is stable, contributive, inclusive, and sustainable. OJK wishes to foster the development of a responsible digital financial sector that builds in customer protection practices, including the responsible use of client data while ensuring the highest data privacy standard, appropriate level of governance, of good governance, and compliance with anti-money laundering, the AML, and combating the financial financing of terrorism and CFT requirements. The building blocks of supporting the development of the sector are ensuring sufficient digital infrastructure, ensuring there is an adequate pool of talent to build the digitized industry. The importance to develop digital skill is also echoed and translated through the blueprint of human resources development in financial service sector for 2021 until 2025. OJK has set 4 pillars as well, 4 missions that achieving strategies such as the first, developing competency standard of human resources in financial industry. And the second, developing competency enhancement method of human resource in financial service industry. The third elements would be developing supporting infrastructure of human resources in financial service industry. And the fourth will be, again, same. Digital skill is the fourth point. Even this is the last point, but I would like to say that this is not the less importance comparing to others. Some of this effort include providing certification and various capacity building programs for employees and leaders of FSIs. In addition, OJK will also continue to encourage in-house capacity building and international certification carried out by each FSIs. Regarding certification, OJK will revise development master plan designed on certification of expertise related to the financial business, including information technology risk management and the FSS. The certification will be tailored to the needs of each function, starting managerial level, the needs of each sector. Meanwhile, the capacity building program for the FSS will encourage FSI to prepare their workforce in the digital era. These programs will be designed collaboratively with the expert from within and outside the country. Universities, international institutions, industry association will be invited and adapted to mapping the study of hard and soft skills needed in the digital era and various international best practices. As a fundamental step for OJK in accelerating the growth of financial literacy and inclusion level, particularly in digital financial innovation, OJK launched digital financial literacy curriculum. It is one of OJK's response to digital financial innovation development in Indonesia, mainly digital talent literacy. Not only to meet the industry's demand for information and communication technology skills, having a proper degree of digital financial literacy implies the ability to support healthy digital financial market where customers can better manage their financial lives and make informed as well as appropriate choices regarding to the responsibility of the use of financial services. Furthermore, OJK collaborates with research centers to consider good international practices to disseminate knowledge within OJK and the digital financial service industry. OJK also collaborates with leading universities to develop curricula and created skill graduates who become part of the talent pool and digital financial service industry. This also includes collaboration with groups and organizations such as Bandung Institute of Technology, Bandung Technopark, the Information and Communication Development Institute, Mandiri Capital, Telkom University, and Universitas 11 Maret in Solo. Internationally, OJK also works closely with various organizations to coordinate and strengthen OJK's capacity building efforts and share international best practices with the industry, including AFTEC and also the Sharia Fintech Association, the AFC. In my personal opinion, OJK is very open to having potential collaboration with Australia, which we believe we could provide support from the critical aspects of education and skill development in Indonesia. which hold the key to the emergence of a strong workforce geared to meet post-pandemic challenges. The OJK Infinity, which acts as innovation hub in Indonesia, will also leverage the technology to enhance the talent development process. It will continue to collaborate with key stakeholders to enhance guidelines on digital customer protection in the digital age while promoting digital financial inclusion and literacy. The OJK Infinity Center will work closely with the fintech industry to ensure their proper adoption within existing fintech industry models to promote these guidelines and efforts. Honorable ladies and gentlemen, to conclude my remarks, I'm optimistic that OJK will act ahead and collaborate with every regulators and institution, both local and international, in developing digital talent to accelerate the digitization of the financial industry and offer great benefits of better financial inclusion in the community. In the end, it will be able to realize equitable development and enhance community welfare. I would like to end my speech and wish you a more vibrant discussion at this event. I hope that God will support us and guide us to walk in promising endeavor. Thank you so very much, and I will get back to Clarice.
Thank you so much, Pat Trianogani, for that presentation. I think we've all learned a lot from that. As we've heard from Pat Karinia and Pat Triano, the growth of the digital finance space here in Indonesia has been pretty impressive, but there's still a long way to go. So to understand the extent of its growth so far, even amidst the pandemic, and to project the industry outlook, let's bring in our first speaker, panel speaker, Pat Eric Sugandi, who is a project consultant with the Asian Development Bank Institute in Tokyo. Pat Eric has recently published a study on Indonesia's fintech industry titled The COVID-19 Pandemic and Indonesia's Fintech Markets. He was previously a senior economist at Standard Chartered Bank in Indonesia and a senior business analyst at Sinovate, a global market research firm. Pak Eric, selamat siang waktu Tokyo. Thank you for joining us.
Selamat siang. Thank you, Clarice. I'm going to deliver my presentation in English. Initially, I thought that I'm going to deliver it in Bahasa, but yeah, I'll do it in English. So we'll start with the presentation. Basically, what I'm going to discuss today is about the fintech market landscape in Indonesia. Now we start with the first part, the introduction. Is it possible to widen the screen? I cannot. Yeah. Okay. So here in the introduction section, basically what I want to say is there are two types of definition of fintech. The first one is the broad definitions, which basically define fintech as the application of technology innovation in the financial service to enhance and advance the financial services. Now, based on the broad definition, the fintech term can be used both to banks and non-bank financial institutions or NBFIs. Now, in the narrow definition and a more colloquial term, fintech refers to the NBFI companies that deliver financial services using the technology platforms. So we can see like this kind of products like peer-to-peer lending, payment transaction, digital financial innovation product, etc. All right. Now, move to the next slide, please. Right. In this presentation, when I refer to fintech, then I refer to the broad definition of fintech. While when I mention about fintech industry and fintech market, then I refer to the industry and the markets of the fintech companies or the NBFIs that offer technology-based financial service product. So in many papers, some of the authors deliberately differentiate between the fintech and the big tech. The the big tech companies basically are the fintech company, but they have a larger scale and a larger capital and larger network, wider network than the smaller fintech companies. So move to the next slide, please. Right. Now, this section discusses about the global and regional landscape of the fintech markets. According to a paper by Corneli in 2020, the Bank for International Settlement estimate that the big tech companies, including the big ones like Amazon, Alibaba, and Facebook, extended $572 billion credit globally, which was twice of the size of the credit extended by the fintech companies in 2019. Now, pertaining to the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on the fintech global fintech industry or fintech markets, basically what I can say that the fintech market, the fintech industry are resilient against the or from the impact, the negative impact from the COVID-19 pandemic. This is shown by the research by the World Bank and the University of Cambridge in 2020. Basically, the survey find that the regulators in many countries reported an increase in the use of many fintech products and services since the outbreak of the pandemic. Another paper conducted by Fu and Misra show also that the spread of the COVID-19 and the related government lockdowns have led to significant increases in the downloads of fintech applications. Move to the next slide, please. All right. Now, another research or study by the CCIF, the World Bank, and the World Economic Forum shows that the growth rate of the fintech transaction volume during the pandemic is higher in emerging markets than in an advanced economy. Now, next we move to the regional landscape in Asia Pacific. China has the largest size of big tech and fintech credit, both in values and terms, and in terms of share of GDP. And then Indonesia is the highest value and the highest proportion of the fintech credit to GDP among the ASEAN countries. But the size of the big tech credit in Indonesia is very small. Please move to the next slide. I just want to show in figure 1, this is the fintech credit as a percentage of GDP, and then the second one is the big tech credit as a percentage of GDP. Right. So we can see clearly that China is dominant here in the region. Please return to the previous slide. All right. The size of digital transaction now. Before we talk about the peer-to-peer lending, now we talk about the digital transaction. Facilitated by banks and NBFI in the Asia Pacific continue to increase despite the outbreak of COVID-19 pandemic, and the total value of digital transaction in the Asia Pacific reached 3,126 billion in 2020. And then China is also again a top player in the digital transaction in the Asia Pacific, with total transaction reached 2,309 billion in 2020. Indonesia also has the highest value of digital transaction in the ASEAN 2020, but the size of the Indonesia's market is very small compared to China. Please move to the 2 slides from, this slide. Figure 3 discusses shows the digital payment transaction values in the Asia Pacific, while figure 4 is the in the Asia Pacific country in US dollar billion. All right, next. Right. Now we go to the national landscape, the Indonesia's fintech market. We know that Indonesia has a large population, growing middle income class, and the high penetration of mobile phones and internet. So Indonesia is a big potential market for the fintech industry. Now, there are 4 main types of fintech products in Indonesia based on their respective business model. First one is the digital payment. Second one is online lending. Third one is the digital financial innovation products. And the fourth is the equity crowdfunding. Now, 2 regulators are responsible for regulating the fintech industry in Indonesia. First one is Bank Indonesia for a payment transaction, and the OJK, or other types of fintech services. I want to show that the assets of Indonesia's fintech company is very small compared to the banking sector asset and the asset of other non-bank financial institution, except for the asset of the micro financial institution. This is shown in table 1. Please move to the next slide. Right. You can see that the one encircled in the red lines are the fintech companies. The size is too small compared to the commercial banks, and then the total of the non-bank financial institution. That said, we should see it as a positive thing, meaning that there is plenty of room for the fintech industry in Indonesia to continue growing. And then another point that I want to make is that fintech companies is not a big competitor against banks. So unlike the trend that we see in the advanced economies and also in China, fintech is not really a threat for the commercial banks, but instead they can form partnership. And then many banks also are interested in investing in the fintech industry. Please return to the previous slide. Right. Now, how about the competition landscape? The number of fintech companies has declined in the past few years. And then the fintech companies will have an oligopolistic structure in the future. Or if there are more competition, it can be like not perfect competition, but monopolistic competition, where there are a few big companies dominate the industry. So we are going to heading towards that direction. And then about half of the fintech companies in Indonesia in 2019 are peer-to-peer lending companies. And the second largest type of fintech company is the digital payment company. Please go 2 slides from here, right? This is showing that the number of fintech companies in Indonesia is declining, figure 5. And figure 6, Indonesia's fintech market segment by product in 2019. Let's go to the next slide. Right. Now pertaining to the impact of the COVID-19 on Indonesia's fintech industry, basically what I can say that Indonesia's fintech industry is relatively resilient from the COVID-19 pandemic. And then we see that the digital payment transaction and peer-to-peer lending only briefly fall in the second quarter of 2020 and in the early of the third quarter 2020. That said, my paper find that the claim that the COVID-19 pandemic accelerates Indonesia fintech market is not supported by empirical evidence. So there's an issue here. I mean, like, we cannot say that we have to explore or investigate further whether there is a change in behavior, consumption behavior, or the use of the payment tools behavior before saying that the fintech, the COVID-19 accelerate the fintech industry. What I see is just people temporarily shift to electronic money instrument because they cannot use the cash or credit card more often than before because of the social distancing. Now, what I have revealed in my paper or find in paper is that the large-scale social distancing policy, or the PSBB, has a negative direct impact on the phone banking, mobile banking, and internet banking transaction. It will be shown in figure 7. That said, the PSBB increased the electronic money transactions. And then pertaining to the negative impact of the PSBB on the peer-to-peer lending, it causes the peer-to-peer lending to decline temporarily, mostly by the decline, driven by the decline in Java. Now, the relatively short PSBB period had prevented the fintech market from taking too many negative impacts from restriction in economic activities. Next is about how the government, the OJK and BI, has used the utilized the fintech industry to support the national economic recovery. You can see, for example, in the government when launching the Kartu Prakerja, it involved the payment fintech companies as well as the fintech that provides classes or courses or teaching materials. Please go to the next slide. All right, this is figures 7 and 8, basically to show that the digital banking transaction values in Indonesia, and most of the transaction temporarily declined during the second quarter of 2020. And then figure 8 showed that the use of electronic money increased during the PSBB. Please go to the next slide. Right, figure 9 and 10 basically show that the peer-to-peer lending temporarily declined during the PSBB period. Okay, please move to the next slide. Right. Now we're discussing about the future of fintech in Indonesia. In broader definition, fintech had been adopted by commercial bank and NBFIs in Indonesia. This shown by a paper by Pak Batunanggar from OJK that find that in general, financial institutions in Indonesia have embraced fintech, while the financial customer have become more familiar with the fintech products. So fintech has improved the efficiency of banks and NBFIs in operational costs. However, there are still many untapped fintech market segments. A study by Nuryakin 2019 find that the main user of fintech for the urban household, with the fintech penetration to the rural household and the MSME, we're still low. So in the future, I think that the fintech can also embrace the rural segment, such as by facilitating market access and digital transaction for farmers. Indonesia's fintech market is still very small. The fintech company is too small to compete with the bank. So the magnitude of disruption in Indonesia's financial system caused by the fintech industry is marginal. So unlike what happened in the advanced economy, especially in the Nordic country, Sweden, etc. We can also see that we know that Japan is very a high-tech country, but we know that the people are still, especially the older generation, are still they still prefer using cash rather than using the fintech payment. There's also another paper by Professor Sayuri Serai and I discussing why the older generation in Japan still prefer to use cash rather than using the fintech payment, because they see that it is safer for them to use cash, and then they also have some issues with the current enhancement in technology. It is too rapid for them, especially for the older generation. But I see that we in Indonesia may follow the route of the Scandinavian countries. The people in Indonesia maybe like to use more fintech transaction in the future, especially for the payment, etc. Now, next is that peer-to-peer lending fintech companies can act as a partner rather than disruptor or competitors to banks and the conventional NBFIs during the COVID-19 pandemic. So I give an example that Bank Mandiri allocates fund from the government to Investri to be extended to the small and medium businesses affected by the pandemic. Please go to the next slide. Right. So what I see that in the future, peer-to-peer lending and digital payment remain dominant fintech products. The fintech markets, be it peer-to-peer lending, digital payment, or other types of fintech products, are likely to continue having oligopoly market structure in the future. Or if there are more competition, it will be like a monopolistic competition. So it is difficult to maintain or to achieve perfect competition in this industry. While there can be many players in its market segment, a few big players will dominate the market. And then merger and acquisition will continue in the fintech industry, and the number of players is likely to decline in the future. So I would say that the era of euphoria in the fintech industry is over or almost over, and the industry will enter a consolidation phase, meaning that said, the industry will be more serious. I mean, like there will be more serious players trying to tap the untapped markets in the market, but the competition will be very fierce. So only many players can be there, but only a few players will have a biggest market share, right? And then the OJK and BI should continue protecting fintech consumers from the bad practices in industry, as Pak Karania said, and also about the security protection. Now, pertaining to the peer-to-peer lending, for instance, the OJ can require the P2P fintech lending companies to publicly announce their lending rates. Basically, now we don't really know the lending rates offered by each of the peer-to-peer lending fintech companies. So the good practice in the banking sector is we have like banks announcing their prime lending rates or something like that. So maybe in the future we can also the OJK can ask the fintech peer-to-peer lending companies to publish their rates, so the consumer can choose the best rates for them, right? The next is the BA, OJK, and the government. No, please. And the Fintech Industry Association should develop and maintain a shared database and mapping on Indonesia fintech industry. Now, I really rely on the data from the OJK published in on their website, but it only covers the peer-to-peer lending. And then for the payment transaction, I use the data from Bank Indonesia, but we don't have publicly available data on crowdfunding and digital innovation products. So it would be better if we, if the OJK or BI can provide this kind of data, and this data will be useful for policy making and business planning. And also the database should be regularly updated because Indonesia's fintech industry rapidly grows. Next slide. Right, this is the next slide. Banks and the conclusions. Banks and BFI in Indonesia will continue adopting fintech in the broad sense because fintech promotes efficiency. And Indonesia's fintech industry, here as discussed in a narrow sense, is still small, but will continue to grow in the future. The industry will enter a consolidation phase with a few big players dominating its market segment. And then the next point is there are still many untapped fintech market segment in Indonesia. Currently, fintech companies are still focusing on the urban population, but eventually they can expand their business to serve the rural population. And then the next point is Indonesia's fintech industry is relatively resilient from the COVID-19 pandemic. And then the next point is the OJK and BI should continue protecting fintech consumers from bad practices in industry and make the fintech industry more competitive. And this is the last point. BI, OJK, and government and Fintech Industry Association should develop and maintain a shared database on mapping on Indonesia's fintech industry. Okay, that's all for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Pa Eric. Indeed, there are many areas where both government and the private sector utilize fintech to accelerate recovery. And as the size of the industry grows, many fintech firms are now having to face serious challenges, not only in the infrastructure limitations, but also quite urgently in the quality of its talent. Our next speaker is the Executive Director of the Indonesian Services Dialogue Council, an independent council that focuses on policy reform for development of services in Indonesia. It promotes tripartite dialogue between government, the private sector, and research institutions. Good morning, Ibu Devi Ariani.
Good morning. Good morning, Clarice. Thank you for having me. Good morning, everyone, distinguished speakers and participants. Today, I will be sharing with you our findings about digital skills gap in fintech industries. This is based on our qualitative research, both focus group discussions as well as in-depth interviews to fintech companies. Next slide, please. So as we are entering the digital era, the need for labor has also transformed. In the emerging state, whereby the use of the technology is not as heavy as it is now, the need for or the requirement for labor is not based on the technology know-how, and the really industrial relations. It's typically traditional industrial relations between employer and employees, and as we are transitioning into digital era, the need for financial and digital literacy is becoming more apparent. And this has also transformed the way in previous era, it's more traditional industrial relations. Now, with the emergence of gig workers, there are more people who are rendering their services without being particularly tied to one employers. So this is also interesting because this is new developments whereby there are more and more gig workers, and the requirement for high-skilled and technology-savvy labor is becoming more and more. So there's a need for training programs that support skills transformation in this digital era. Next, please. So the critical talent issues facing by fintech, based on our research, is first and foremost, they mention about the lack of knowledge and understanding of fintech businesses. And due to the scarcity of talent, especially in the IT sector, computer and software engineers, this has been ongoing issues that are currently faced by most of the fintech companies. And talent retention becomes an issue because of the scarcity of talent. Most of the companies are trying to hijack from one companies because of there's no enough supply. So this has been also an issue in terms of retaining the talent. There's also lack of trainers from within the industries. So what they do is they try to collaborate or try to acquire external trainers because there's not enough trainers even from within the industries. Next. So the basic skills that are needed, that are mentioned by the fintech companies, are the knowledge of fintech business and the fintech regulatory landscape, because the fintech industry is heavily regulated. Thereby, the companies stated that the knowledge of the fintech business becomes important. And then the technical digital skills such as cybersecurity, software development, data management. This has also been the ongoing issues that are faced by many of the fintech companies. So these two are mostly come up during our discussions with the fintechs. And as the fintech companies grow bigger and they're getting more established, the needs for the soft skills such as communication skills and customer service skills is then added into the need for the skilled labor. But mostly they mention about the knowledge and the technical skills before the soft skills is added. So how do they run the trainings currently? Most of the fintech companies do in-house training programs with in-house trainers, so the employee training the other employees. There's also on-the-job training that they are currently run by some of fintech companies, especially the IT graduate that they're trying to nurture to fill in the IT position. Or they're trying to collaborate with other institutions for the financial literacy training or other relevant topics. Next, please. Yeah. So I would like to touch on this as well, because this seems to be overlooked, whereby when we talk about the fintech, it's not just the fintech per se and the workers in the fintech industry, but also there's also people who are working for the fintech. These are the freelancer agents, the marketing agents that are estimated about 5 million. And these people, because they're talking to the customers directly, they also need to be paid attention in terms of building their skills for customer servicing or communication skills. So outside the formal workers within the fintech, there's also this fintech agent that needs to be put into consideration in terms of building the skills. So to sum up, next, there's apparent needs for comprehensive training modules in the fintech industry that covers both technical as well as soft skills training. The training for trainers program, due to the limited trainers in the industry, this needs to be developed as well to bridge the lack of trainers, and expand the scope of training to also reach the non-permanent workers within the fintech industries. So this will conclude my presentation today. I'm handing this back to Clarice.
Terima kasih, Ibu Devi. I think you've highlighted a couple of really interesting elements within the fintech sector that it can't be successful unless you have skilled talent. So that's something that I think we should pay a lot of attention to. So here's a quick fact. With more than 800 fintech companies, Indonesia's neighbour Australia has one of the world's most exciting and dynamic fintech industries, where lending continues to be the driver. Allow me to introduce our next speaker, Stuart Stoyan. Stuart is an investor, advisor, and serial entrepreneur with expertise in fintech, open data, and scaling technology-enabled businesses. Stuart was the founder and CEO of Moneyplace, a leading Australian consumer finance business, which was then acquired by Liberty Financial Group Limited. Stuart has helped shape Australian fintech and innovation policies as the chair of Fintech Australia and as the founder of the National Fintech Census, Australia's first and largest survey of the local fintech industry. He is a member of the Australian Government's Fintech Advisory Group and the Open Banking Data Standards Board Advisory Committee. Welcome, Stuart.
Thank you very much. Delighted to be here. Now, I had some slides which I'll be able to then talk through and give you a bit of an overview of the Australian fintech landscape. For those of you who have been fortunate enough to have been to Australia, you'll recognise that is Vegemite, and that is something that you miss and that you're looking forward to enjoying when you get back to Australia. For those of you who have not been to Australia, it's something that you'll get to enjoy if you do get down under. If I can go to the next slide, please. So just to give some context around Fintech Australia, this was an organisation I helped set up and was sort of one of the founding directors and then chair. Fintech Australia is the national industry body for fintech. I would suggest for anybody that is interested in learning more about Australian fintech and learning more about opportunities in Australia, the fintech landscape and whatnot, it's definitely worth checking out and visiting the Fintech Australia website, which is there, fintechaustralia.org.au. If we go to the next slide, please. One of the things that I helped set up at Fintech Australia, and one of the things that has now continued on, is the Fintech Census. So this is an annual survey that is conducted that's now run by EY-Sweeney. It is run much more professionally now than, say, when I initially did it with a SurveyMonkey survey back in sort of 2015. But EY-Sweeney now runs a very comprehensive survey and census of the Australian fintech landscape. And the interesting insights that have come out from that, from the most recent survey from 2021, is that despite COVID, fintech continues to thrive in Australia. What we've seen is a record amount of investor capital come into the market, and not just across sort of all fintechs. We've seen a rising tide of $100 million sort of funding rounds for some startups, as well as just a greater availability of capital for early stage seed investments and Series A investments. This has sort of coincided with an increasing proportion of fintechs moving now to post profit and demonstrating the glide path for other fintechs to be able to follow. And what we've then seen in direct response to COVID is that that's created a digital acceleration, and that's actually helping drive fintech innovation, whether it's through banking partnerships and banking collaboration, or in particular non-bank partnerships and collaboration, where fintechs are able to access the customer base and client base of non-financial services providers to be able to provide a fintech offering. We're also seeing from that is a strong amount of revenue is now coming from offshore. So whereas Australia initially, go back sort of 5 years ago, had a lot of domestically focused fintechs, we've seen in the last sort of 12, 24 months that the sort of rise of globally focused fintechs has come into the fore. So that not only then creates opportunities to be able to work with a global fintech in Australia, but also means that many Australian fintechs now have regional outposts, whether it's through Southeast Asia or further abroad. The last sort of point here then sort of gets into the focus around where fintech opportunities are from an employment perspective, is that one of the sort of key things that the survey is focused on, and is a question of what is it that fintechs in Australia actually need? What is it that is keeping them awake at night? What is the biggest issues? And government incentives have always been sort of the number one issue, in particular around the R&D tax grant, which is an innovation grant that's provided. Industry collaboration, then was second, but global talent acquisition and then increased diversity were the third and fourth most prominent considerations by fintechs. And it's that talent acquisition, for reasons that are occurring in sort of tech sectors globally, but specifically in Australia, there is very much an excess demand and a need to hire more talent into Australian fintechs. Diversity is a point we've started to focus on, and that's diversity both in a sort of a traditional sense of gender, but also an increasing focus now around diversity of cultural background. And that's something that has been a focus too. But if we can move to the next slide, I'll be able to go into some details around this. One of the questions that is asked is, what are the roles that you are struggling to fill? And primarily tech, it's engineering, it's product management, and it's data science roles. So as the continued sector growth has occurred, we've seen labor shortages come in, which is leading to increased competition for hiring talent. We see that 2 in 3 fintechs indicate that it's more challenging to attract qualified or suitable talent in Australia in the last 18 months, in fact. And with the chart here, you see sort of at the bottom, what we have here is in the darker blue is the 2021 survey result, and in the teal or the green is the 2016 result, just to give a sense. Engineering and software still is the most difficult area to attract talent, with just over 60% of fintech saying this was an area that they are recruiting into. Now that has come off from prior from 2016, where it was sort of mid 70s, 75, 76%. But that's because of the emergence then of some roles that previously didn't exist. Product management is an increasing role, with 31% of fintechs requiring that. But data science or data engineering was the third most sought after opportunity. And that is 30% of fintechs are now actively hiring in that space and struggling to find talent. So in 2016, that was a role that didn't exist. From there, you see it's sort of sales and mobile development, design, user experience and marketing. But then we move into a focus around regulatory and risk management, and also cybersecurity, which has come into the fore from previous years. What we've found is that on a further question, it was around, do you feel or do you perceive that there is a lack of experienced startup and fintech talent in Australia? And the response to that is just on half of Australian fintechs feel that there's a lack of both experienced startup and fintech talent. So to the earlier presentation just preceding this, it's not just about having fintech knowledge, but it's also looking for people who've got startup or scale-up experience as well, who might be able to then, I guess, learn the specifics of fintech, but bring that startup scale-up experience to fintechs. I don't have a chart on this, but just as a point of reference, 26% of leadership positions are held by females in fintechs in Australia, and similarly, 1 in 4 founders are female. That is a massive step up from prior years. 5 years ago, that was sort of close to 1 in 10 or 10%. And then on the sort of culturally and linguistically diverse statistic, which is sort of I guess an Australian reference for basically people that are not necessarily sort of Australian. What we see is 19% of leadership positions are now held by employees who identify as being culturally and linguistically diverse, which I think shows that there is great pathways there for people who are not necessarily born in Australia to be able to come to Australia and to be able to work in Australian fintechs. If we could move to the next slide, please. Just to sort of close out, if you are considering moving to Australia or considering an Australian fintech opportunity, the Fintech Australia website does include some extensive information around careers in fintech in Australia. There's a jobs board. There is also a program, the Digital Jobs Program in Victoria, and detailed information about that, as well as some links and references to different courses in fintech, where there are a number of education institutions that are now running either specific fintech courses or sort of more sort of generalist courses that include fintech components. If we can jump to the next slide, just to give an example, the portal currently says there are 124 companies with 6,217 jobs available. My quick scan of the job board didn't quite add up to 6,000, but maybe that's the count of the roles across all organizations. But as you can sort of see here, there are a number of fintechs that have roles, ranging from a handful of roles through to 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 roles. There are large fintechs that are actively hiring and constantly hiring. And there are smaller fintechs that are looking to be able to build out a founding team as well. So there are opportunities there. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is my presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Stuart, and thanks also to all of our presenters so far for sharing some very interesting and useful insights into the current and future trends of fintech and the skills demands that are involved. We now invite the audience to submit questions to the Q&A box. So if you do have a question that you have been thinking of asking, please put it in there. But allow me to first go to Pat Johannes Silalahi, the Human Resources Manager of Bibit and Stockbit. Many on this webinar will be familiar with Bibit, an investing app which is highly popular amongst millennials and first-time investors in Indonesia. Bibit was launched in 2019 by Stockbit, which is a stock investing platform and community. The app runs robo-advisor services for mutual funds and invests users' money based on their risk profile. So, Pat Johannes, when you recruit talent, what are the things that you typically look for?
Okay, thank you, Clarence, for the question. So I think it's really interesting. Clarence, to have a flexibility, I'll share my thoughts both in Indonesian and English, so it's easier for everyone to catch up. Jadi, gue akan coba manage the conversation in English, bahasa Indonesia, supaya karena I realize that many of you are actually students here or even fresh graduate, so just to make it more easier for everybody. Jadi, I think let's begin with the challenges that we are facing at the moment, gitu ya. Jadi the question is what we are looking at the talents, gitu kan, ketika kita ngomong di fintech industry. So the problem is actually udah di cover sama all the speakers before, gitu. So one of the problems in Indonesia fintech landscape is, especially for investment, only 4.2% ya tadi dari Bapak dari pembicara sebelumnya bahwa itu sudah melakukan investasi. While investment is not an easy fruit to digest, gitu. Jadi it's not something that you can actually understand by doing it. Gitu. There's a need for you to learn a bit about what is investment and then knows how it works. So the biggest challenge that we are facing at the moment, gitu ya, as a fintech company is actually when we hire talents, we always look at three scopes. First scope is actually about their technicality in doing their roles. Second area that we are also looking is actually the culture fitness with the person itself. And the last part is actually about their business acumen, meaning their understanding about the products or the industry itself. So in the current situations, when we are looking at talents, gitu ya, always the challenge that we are facing is the last one that I mentioned to you. It's about the business acumen part. I mean, like, if we refer back to the previous speakers, he mentions that only 4% of Indonesians actually knows about what is investment itself. So if we link this together, it makes sense to say that if we want to hire people that is able to work very aggressively in the industry, we need to have a people that also knows about how the industry works. But the sad part is actually only 4% of that people that knows how the industry works. So I think my highlight point here is when we hire people from the market, we always look at these 3 points, which is first one is the functionality skills. So the secondly is the culture, but the last one is the business acumen. What we are always be looking very difficult to look at the market at the moment is the last one. So, but if you ask me what we are looking is actually these 3 things, but the problems is actually on the third one, which is the business acumen part. So I hope it's answering your questions, Clarice.
Yes, thank you so much. I think it's really useful to get that insight from industry in Indonesia in terms of, what they're actually looking for and how they go about, I guess, addressing those skills needs. So next, I actually want to go to Melbourne, where Dr. Fari Bentley, PhD, an IT lecturer from Melbourne Polytechnic, is standing by. Dr. Fari, as we've heard from our speakers, the workforce has a key role in determining short and long-term success of these fintech companies. From a teaching perspective, what are the skill sets that institutions such as yours provide for students pursuing studies in fintech or e-commerce?
Basically, what we provide to students is an innovative learning environment where they can build on fintech skills. And to do this, we basically teach topics such as innovation, entrepreneurship, and allow them to actually prototype e-commerce businesses. And what this basically provides is a testing environment for students to be able to actually connect their e-commerce platforms with payment systems and then develop the entire customer experience in terms of building, the front end and the back end and connecting and integrating with payment systems. So it's a great way for students to actually innovate and understand and build on skills such as project management, design, and launching their own products.
Great, thank you so much for that. So now we're actually going to start asking questions from the Q&A box. So if you have a question that you've been wanting to ask to any speaker on the call today, please add it to the Q&A box and we will start trying to address them. So the first one that I would like to read is from Fei Lu. It's actually addressed to Pak Kar, however, Pak Kar has dropped off. But I think that a few of our other speakers may be able to address this. And the question is there any opportunity for Australian businesses to participate in the fintech boom in Indonesia? So maybe if Pak Eric or Pak Johannes would like to comment on that, collaborating with Australian fintech businesses in Indonesia.
Hello. Well, of course, there are opportunities for Australian investors as well as investors from other countries to invest in the fintech companies in Indonesia in the narrow sense. And they need investors basically because the market is so large, but they don't really have the enough assets or capability to expand to the country. But of course, there are many areas that can be explored there, especially on the peer-to-peer lending and payment transaction payments area. Other like the Bitcoins, this kind of stuff. I mean, in Indonesia, it is not allowed because of the we have a currency law that so the one that conduct the Bitcoin or cryptocurrencies is to be frank, it is a bit illegal, or maybe it is discouraged, because now we see many central banks, not just Bank Indonesia, but also the PBOC, the Chinese Central Bank, and other central banks sees that the cryptocurrency is threatening the stability of the financial system. But if you want to invest in, like I said, in the peer-to-peer lending and transaction payments products, the room is still there. A lot of untapped opportunities in Indonesia. That's all. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much for that. And we have Lauren Adams on the line, who is the Trade and Investment Commissioner from Austrade, who would actually like to comment on this. So I will invite Lauren to add.
Thanks, everyone. Hi, Clarice. I think just to pick up on some of the points about the need for strong cybersecurity and transaction security, that's a particular area where we're seeing a lot of interest from Australian service providers in Indonesia, and it's something that Australia is working with a number of providers on in supporting to improve the security of Indonesian fintech and banking transactions. Other areas around education and digital skills development are also areas where we're doing a lot of work with Australian businesses. So there's definitely plenty of interest and plenty of opportunity, and we're actively participating in this sector.
Yeah. I think just to add on to that point, Clarice, I think one of the things that we currently also exploring in terms of the startup ecosystem is actually how to implement blockchains into our ecosystems, right? To the market. And that's the kind of, like as mentioned, the education part or even the capability part is actually something that we can work on together with Australian business, because I believe in Australia, blockchains also is already more advanced compared to us. And the capability that we have in the market is very rare if you are talking about technology. And I think that's the area where Indonesia can collaborate more with other countries to improve our capability in terms of more advanced technology like AI, as well as this blockchain which is coming to Indonesia.
Yeah, great. Thanks for that. I now want to go to Rati, who has her hand raised. Can you unmute yourself and ask your question? Okay, I don't think that Rati is able to comment, so we will go back to our presenters. So on skills, I invite Dr. Fari to continue commenting on how institutions like Melbourne Polytechnic can assist industry to ensure that they have talent ready for working in their industry. So back to you, Dr. Fari.
Thank you, Clarice. Good morning or good afternoon to where you are based on around the world. My name's Fari Benry, and I teach business and IT subjects at Melbourne Polytechnic. Just waiting for the slides. Yeah, so obviously fintech is a new disruptive and innovative industry, which is pretty much sort of followed on from other industries that have been disrupted, such as transport, like Uber, hotels with Airbnb, etc. So fintech is just another area that is being disrupted through innovation and digitalization. So from the previous presenters, we've seen and heard a lot about the statistics regarding the skills gaps, etc. But if we look at what fintech actually covers, banking and finance mainly covers the areas of the industry itself, regulations and laws. And so this has enabled the fintech industry to actually innovate and find gaps and improve the process of either lending or providing payments or money transfers or mortgages to customers in a faster, better, or cheaper process. In terms of the learning process for fintech, and especially disruptive innovation and digital innovation, also new learning methods are being adopted to teach students and enable them to be more competent in the skills that are required for innovation. And the Australian government and the Indonesian governments have specifically are fostering and promoting entrepreneurship and innovation skills. But just talking about these topics in general, it doesn't really help all fintech organizations find people with the right skills. So specific skills that students or employees need to build on is creativity, problem solving, and critical thinking. So what this basically allows people to do is work with artifacts where basically people can actually explain something and solve a problem on one sheet of paper. And one of the artifacts that is commonly used now in terms of disruptive innovation is the business model canvas. So I'd like to quote Einstein, who said that if you can't explain your idea to a 6-year-old, it means that you don't know what you're talking about. And you know, when I first heard that, I didn't really understand. It's only through innovative learning that I've actually understood what that means. In other words, people need to be able to articulate a problem and then build on a solution based on innovative learning. So in terms of operationalizing innovative learning, and the previous presenters actually covered some of these things. So in other words, the education or the training that is required to build fintech skills specifically is about building and innovating business models, building better customer experiences, and then giving students the ability to build prototypes for fintech, and then launch their products and manage their projects. And so this actually covers a lot of the skills gap as well. And then students can actually decide on which areas they want to go down or specialize in as well. Now, I teach a course called e-business systems. And in this course, we basically use WordPress and WooCommerce, which are open source platforms. Now, one of the best things that's actually come out of the internet and the software world is open source. So through open source, it allows us to test and build prototypes where students have the ability to connect to different integrating services like Australia Post, where basically customers can actually choose the type of postage or delivery services that they need, connect to PayPal or Stripe, which are two of the payment systems available in Australia, and it actually allows them to test the environment, so they don't actually need to have a live site. They can actually test the whole process through this. And what this basically allows the students to do is actually learn each of these skills and demonstrate it as well. So building these prototypes will also help with students or employees within their own organizations to demonstrate what the prototypes do and how they work. So the training opportunities here through Melbourne Polytechnic and I guess through the Australian education providers is that we have the ability to develop either short courses in all of these skill areas or short-term courses that are non-awarded, and also they can be delivered online, face-to-face, and also these short courses can then be developed so they have pathways into specific qualifications such as at the certificate, diploma, or bachelor levels. And so So the advantage is that whatever course students actually complete, it won't be wasted. They can then use them as credits for future purposes. Thank you. Does anyone have any questions?
Great, thank you so much for that. I think it gives us a good snapshot of what education institutions are doing to try and fill the skills gap and ensure that, you know, industry actually has the talent that they're looking for. So it's really good to see that. So we do welcome questions in the Q&A box. And I think continuing on from our sort of topic earlier on Indonesian and Australian collaboration, there is a question from Andini to Stuart, and she is asking, is there any interest from Australian fintech firms to work with Indonesian fintech platforms? So this is sort of going the other way to what I asked earlier. So from your perspective, Stuart, are you aware of any Australian fintech companies who are looking towards Indonesia or even Southeast Asia?
The answer is yes, definitely. There are a number of fintechs, particularly in sort of payment space, that are looking towards Southeast Asia or have operations in Southeast Asia. There are lending businesses that have sort of synergies across I guess, you know, data and analytics and being able to use sort of non-traditional data sets to be able to make credit decisions. Also from a blockchain perspective and I guess a crypto more broadly, there is a look into the region. In terms of, you know, specific opportunities, I'd sort of suggest that you connect in through Fintech Australia and you'd be able to then make those connections because there are I guess, discussion groups and sort of subgroups that will then want to come together and collaborate. So that's the best sort of path forward. From an external sort of Indonesia into Australia, it'd probably just be to be able to directly contact the FA team, and then they'll be able to make appropriate introductions as well.
Great, thank you so much for that. And we did have a question from Dehendra Wadhana directed to Park Car, but he's dropped off the line, but I might change it slightly and note that obviously cybercrime is not the only threat for fintech development in Indonesia and also in Australia. So from, I guess, the education institution side, I'll go to Dr. Fari. You know, what are the, I suppose, complementary courses that, you know, your institution and other institutions that you know of who are sort of delivering in this fintech space, teaching to ensure that it's not just that talent have the skills to, I suppose, have the technical expertise to build fintech platforms and, you know, operate in the financial sector, but also have expertise in the cybersecurity space and data security, big data analytics, and that sort of thing. So, any comments you have on that?
Yeah, we're constantly partnering with IT companies and using their products and teaching our students how to use their products. So if they actually get certification from those organizations, which adds additional skills when they graduate, but at the different levels, diploma levels, undergrad levels, we do provide specializations in cybersecurity, in networking, software development, and business information systems. So at all the qualification levels, we do provide those skills and training.
Great, thank you so much for that. Yeah, it's good to know that there are sort of a really broad range of potential courses for students when they're thinking about, you know, the sorts of skills that they might need, and for professionals also existing in the workforce, how do they upskill? So I'd like to thank our panelists and everyone for staying with us, but unfortunately we are running out of time, so I'm going to have to cut the Q&A off here. But I'd like to thank Austrade Indonesia for their continued support to promote bilateral commercial partnerships between Indonesia and Australia. And so I'd like to call on Lauren Adams, who is the Deputy Consul General at the Australian Consulate in Surabaya and the Austrade Trade and Investment Commissioner, Lauren leads Australia's commercial engagement in advanced technology and the digital economy through her job. And prior to joining Austrade, Lauren was the Regional Director for Southeast Asia at Asia Group Advisors based in Jakarta. She has extensive experience supporting investors in multinational companies to successfully enter and operate in Indonesia and the broader Southeast Asian region. And that's across a variety of sectors, including technology, payments, and financial services. So, Lauren, it's good to see you.
Thanks, Clarice. It's nice to see you too. And salam kenal to everyone on the call. It's great to see such a strong turnout. And I'd like to start my comments first by thanking you and Catalyst for bringing us all together to focus on fintech skills for the future in Indonesia. It's also nice to be joined on this call by a number of long-time friends and acquaintances. Events such as today and Catalyst's work to drive forward the IA-CEPA Economic Cooperation Program are essential to bringing our business communities together to encourage, strengthen mutual understanding and unlock the full potential between business players in our two countries. As mentioned by all the speakers, digital payments in Indonesia, it's just grown exponentially throughout the pandemic. Likewise with e-commerce, with only more growth to come, with about US $76 billion predicted growth over the next 4 years for the e-commerce market. I'd also like to acknowledge the efforts of Pak Triyono and OJK and many of the others on the call in developing and implementing the platforms and frameworks that have catalyzed and enabled this growth while supporting financial inclusion and interoperability throughout Indonesia and the broader ecosystem. Growth in digital payments and the digital economy more broadly is driving opportunities that not only in the supporting sectors around payments and fintechs, but also data centers and cloud services. As businesses look to digitize their operations, they're also expanding beyond metro areas to match consumer expectations. So it's clearly a booming market for digital infrastructure and solutions, with associated opportunities for Australian businesses to partner and collaborate with these firms. As Pak Triyono and Stuart highlighted, developing digital talent, including for fintech, remains a key priority in both countries. For Indonesia, education, skills, and training are one of the identified priorities outlined in the recently launched Blueprint for Trade and Investment with Indonesia. The blueprint itself provides practical advice to Australian businesses on entering the Indonesian market and strengthening commercial relationships with Indonesia. And I'd encourage those on the call to have a look at that and the areas that are outlined therein. Summarising some of the points that have been made by our speakers that I've jotted down here, collaboration is key. Innovative learning, critical thinking and problem solving, those soft skills that enable innovation are key. There's high demand for intermediate to advanced digital skilled workers, data science, data analytics, high-level coding, machine learning, AI, cybersecurity. Such skills are still in need of development in Indonesia, and there's opportunities for further collaboration and support from Australian providers there. Picking up on some other points, entrepreneurship, curriculum development and train-the-trainer programs throughout all stages of the education system in Indonesia, also very much an opportunity there. As highlighted by Dr. Fahri, short course programs generally preferred in Indonesia, and similar programs are being offered by Melbourne Polytechnic. It's also beneficial for Australian providers to consider having local partners who are able to provide that important market knowledge and can help localise solutions to local fintech technologies. In addition to the benefits of formal education and skills development, we've witnessed the ability for business collaboration and investment to help unlock knowledge exchange and shared experience. Austrade and Indonesia, we're working with a number of Australian businesses, as I've mentioned, to help expand on these efforts. So I think I'll close out there. Happy to have follow-up discussions with anyone on this call. Feel free to reach out. And I'd just like to acknowledge again the ongoing efforts of all on this call to enable and share and supporting the continued growth of fintech in Indonesia and the broader digital economy. So thanks, and back to you, Clarice.
you, Lauren. Yeah, I think the speakers have given us so many insights and so many things to think about. So it's really wonderful to have this kind of event and to have the support from organisations like Austrade. So this brings us to the end of our event today. I want to thank everyone for their attendance and all of their speakers for their great contribution to the discussion. If you're not yet familiar with Catalyst, we'd like to invite you to check out our website at IA-CEPA-catalyst.org and our social media channels at catalyst_IA. We would love to hear from you. So from all of us at Catalyst, have a great day, dan terima kasih.
Semuanya pasti akan bisa diserap, cuma tinggal waktunya kapan. Jadi kalau di Indonesia sendiri sebenarnya lembaga-lembaganya sudah cukup aware tentang itu, tapi juga perkembangan kejahatan cybernya kan juga pesat ya. Jadi akhirnya memang harus terus update.